The station lights flickered for the third time in an hour, and Lance Merrick sighed so hard it fogged up his visor. He poked at the console like a man playing whack-a-mole with fate, muttering threats to the wiring he knew wouldn't listen. Another alert blinked on his screen, a repair request tagged Priority 4, which in space station terms meant low enough to ignore, but annoying enough to eventually ruin your week. The location made him squint. Bay 94. Jay, that docking ring hadn't seen a live pilot in 3 years. Last time anyone went near it, they came back with 6 types of rust and a stowaway rodent that started a spice smuggling ring in the ventilation system. Still, protocol was protocol, and his supervisor, a coffee-drunk AR named Derek, was already paging him with monotone menace. "You have received a maintenance assignment, Lance. Declining this task will result in disciplinary karaoke," Derek intoned from the ceiling speaker. "Fine, fine," Lance groaned, slapping the accept key with the drama of a Shakespearean lead. "If I die, tell my plants they can have my room." He grabbed his toolkit, which consisted of 1 overpriced plasma spanner, a roll of sealant tape, and 3 suspicious-looking screws he swore he hadn't put there. Then he began the long walk down the empty corridor to 94J, whistling to keep the ghosts of neglected tech bays from getting ideas. The air changed as soon as he crossed the threshold. Cooler, still. The motion sensors didn't even bother to activate. One flickering overhead lamp cast a lonely cone of light on a ship he'd never seen before. Sleek, jet black, humming so softly it was almost seductive. It looked like someone had welded a dagger to a whisper. Lance approached cautiously, raising his scanner. No response from the ship's ID beacon. The hull shimmered with an alloy he didn't recognize, though it bore the scars of recent battle. Plasma scoring near the thrusters, a ragged gash along the side panel. He reached for the manual override. The panel popped open with a soft hiss, revealing a tangled mess of conduits, coolant tubing, and something that might have been organic. Lance blinked. "Well," he muttered, digging into his toolkit, "you're either a ship or a very quiet pet. Let's see which one bleeds coolant." He got to work, whistling off-key, occasionally cursing the previous mechanic who clearly had either tentacles or a death wish. The power couplings had been routed through what looked like a crystalline matrix, and there was no backup battery. Only a strange, pulsing orb nestled in the heart of the circuit. "Either you're running on forbidden tech," he said aloud, "or someone wired your ship like a lasagna." A shadow moved across the ramp. Lance glanced up and froze. She stepped out of the ship with the grace of someone used to being obeyed, dressed in a long, iridescent cloak that shimmered like the night sky seen through tears. Her eyes locked onto his, brilliant gold, piercing, unblinking, and her ears, long, elegant, unmistakably non-human. "Hey," he said, because his brain short-circuited under pressure. "Nice ship. Definitely not cursed." She tilted her head. "Are you the technician?" "I prefer the term miracle worker, but yeah, Lance Merrick. You called in the maintenance, right?" She hesitated. "Yes, the ship was damaged. I require it operational again. Immediately." Her voice had that calm urgency that usually meant someone somewhere was either dying or plotting to. Lance nodded slowly. "No pressure," he said, tightening a bolt that hissed angrily at him. "Just trying to keep this thing from melting through the floor. What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" "Space lice? Rogue space bears?" "A targeted strike," she replied. "My pursuers damaged the propulsion systems. I require discretion." "Right," he said, trying not to look too closely at the still glowing scorch marks. "Well, you got it. Total discretion. Lance Merrick. Friend to shady clients everywhere." She didn't smile. Not exactly, but something softened in her expression. She stepped closer, peering over his shoulder. Her presence was oddly electric, like standing near a static storm. "You're quite skilled," she said. "Oh, flattery," he grinned. "That'll get you a half-off coupon for my next repair." She studied him for a moment, as if deciding whether he was worth the truth. Then she spoke softly. "I am not who I appear to be. This ship, it is not just a vehicle. It is my sanctuary." "Cool," he replied, tightening another panel. So royalty, secret agent, or runaway pop star? She blinked. I beg your pardon? Just narrowing it down, he said. People don't usually talk about sanctuaries unless they've got big titles or big enemies. The woman hesitated again. You ask too many questions. And you answer too few, he shot back, smiling. We'll make a great sitcom. Silence fell for a moment. Then the ship gave a soft chime, and the main systems flickered to life. There, Lance said, dusting off his hands. Repaired your grav dampeners, reinforced the primary intake, and recalibrated your navigation so it doesn't spin you into a black hole. Excellent, she said, moving toward the cockpit. I appreciate your service. No problem, he replied, already turning to leave. Just another day in the glamorous life of Lance Merrick, savior of ships, champion of duct tape. He was halfway down the corridor when he paused, frowning. He'd seen a blinking light on her dash, an old signal, buried deep in the navigation logs, one of the kind that meant a beacon had been triggered, a tracking beacon. Lance's gut turned cold. He tapped his comm. Derek, run a scan on outgoing signals from Bay 94J, will you? Scan complete, Derek replied. Signal detected. Long-range tracking ping. Highly encrypted. Also, Lance, your lunch is getting cold. Thanks, Derek, Lance muttered. Add accidentally helping fugitives to my resume. He turned back, eyes narrowing. Whatever kind of royalty she wasn't running from just anyone. And he just put her ship back on the grid. The first explosion shook the station hard enough to knock over Lance's half-eaten sandwich, which he took personally. That was my lunch, he grumbled, clutching the wall as alarms howled through the corridors like a choir of hungover banshees. Unscheduled arrival in docking quadrant 94J, Derek's voice intoned with a bit more smugness than usual. Probability of hostile intent, 92%. Probability you will regret skipping your lunch break, 100%. Lance sprinted back toward the docking bay, toolkit clanking at his hip, heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and something disturbingly close to excitement. This was not the first time things had gone sideways on this rust bucket of a station, but it was definitely the first time it involved a mysterious woman with diplomatic posture and ears that belonged in a fantasy hollow. He rounded the last corridor, nearly colliding with her. Kalara, he still wasn't sure if that was her real name or just something elegant she used to keep people guessing, stood calm in the chaos, as if explosions were just a minor inconvenience. We need to leave, she said, eyes scanning the smoke curling under the emergency doors. Oh, now you want to leave? Lance said, dodging a fire suppression drone as it zipped by, spraying foam in all the wrong directions. Because when I said this place was a death trap, you said, and I quote, it will do. Kalara didn't answer. She grabbed his wrist and yanked him toward the hangar. Her grip was surprisingly strong, also slightly electrifying, but that might have just been the static from the faulty light fixtures. They found me, she said. Who found you? Space debt collectors? A galactic HOA? Be specific. Before she could respond, the ceiling erupted in a plume of sparks, and 3 sleek figures in obsidian armor dropped down like malevolent acrobats. One of them pointed a weapon that looked like a clarinet, but hummed with enough energy to atomize furniture. Kalara didn't hesitate. She lifted her hand, and the lights around them pulsed. The ship behind her whirred to life, ramp dropping open with a hiss like an angry serpent. Inside. Now, she ordered. Lance bolted, dragging his tool case because he had emotional attachments. The moment they were inside, Kalara slapped her palm to the control panel, and the ship roared forward before the ramp had even sealed shut. Lance stumbled into a seat that looked custom-made for someone more regal and less clumsy. So, he said as the ship rocketed out of the hangar and into open space. On a scale of 1-2, they're going to turn us into decorative ash. How bad is this? Kalara was already flipping switches and typing commands in a script that looked like someone had taught Vines to write. They are part of the Obsidian Guard, she said, loyal to my uncle. If they found me, the encryption matrix failed, which means I fixed something too well, Lance muttered. I hate when that happens. An alert chimed. 2 ships on their tail, angular and fast, with weapons hot. Oh, look, Lance said, peering over her shoulder. We have fans. Kalara didn't smile, but she didn't scowl either. That was progress. "I require your assistance," she said. "Well, you're in luck. My resume includes fixing alien royalty ships and making excellent coffee." She gestured to the console beside her. "Activate the aft disruptor field, then reroute power to the tertiary thrusters." Lance stared at the console. "Yeah, okay. 2 questions. 1. Which button lies to me the least? 2. What's a tertiary thruster?" She raised an eyebrow. "You repaired this ship." "I repaired the hull and the diagnostic system. You didn't mention the flight controls were in riddles." Nevertheless, he threw switches until the ship jerked, engines whining as power surged into parts of the system that had previously been napping. A flicker on the monitor showed the pursuers briefly losing lock. "Yes!" he shouted. "In your face, overly dramatic space ninjas!" A blast rocked the hull, throwing him into Kaelara's side. She caught him instinctively, and for a moment, they were just 2 people jammed together in a spaceship dodging plasma fire and bad decisions. "Do you have a plan?" he asked. "Yes." "Good. I'm improvising." "Less good." Kalara spun the ship around a cluster of asteroids with the grace of a dancer. Behind them, the enemy ships closed the distance. "We need a hiding place," she said. "There's a junk field not far from here," Lance said, "full of old mining rigs and busted satellites. Basically a scrapyard for the romantically doomed." She adjusted course. The stars blurred as they made the jump, and within moments they dropped out into a graveyard of forgotten tech. The ship powered down, sinking into the field like a predator hiding in coral. Inside, Lance finally let himself breathe. "So," he said, rubbing his face, "want to tell me why your uncle's goons are trying to decorate space with your remains?" Kalara hesitated. "I am, or was, the Queen of Viridian. I fled after a failed attempt on my life." "Oh," Lance said. "Cool, cool. I fixed a Queen's spaceship. That explains the upholstery." She glanced at him. "You're taking this rather well. Well, your enemies are trying to kill me too, so I figure this is a bonding experience." She didn't answer, but she didn't push him out the airlock either. Lance leaned back. "So what now?" Kalara studied the stars. "Now we vanish, and you, Technician Merrick, are officially involved." "Does it come with dental?" A flicker of a smile touched her lips. Outside, the stars swirled silently. Lance woke to the hum of the ship's auxiliary systems, purring like a satisfied cat. His head had been nestled against a console that definitely wasn't built for ergonomic napping, and he was fairly certain he drooled into a port labeled Neural Uplink, which frankly raised questions he was too afraid to ask. Kalara stood in the cockpit, one hand on the console and the other clasping a steaming mug of something blue and suspiciously frothy. "Morning, Technician," she said without turning. "That depends entirely on whether we're still being hunted by lethal space ballet dancers," he groaned, stretching until something cracked. "They've left the junk field. For now." "Great. You know, this might be the best vacation I've ever had. 5 stars, very immersive. Would recommend to fellow technicians who enjoy space assassins and mystery beverages." She held out a second mug. "Try it." Lance sniffed it. "Is it going to grow legs and ask for equal rights?" "It is Kelvirian root extract, stimulates clarity, reflexes, and may briefly cause your tongue to glow." "Well, that's a sales pitch if I've ever heard one." He took a sip, winced, and muttered, "Tastes like regret and battery acid." "That means it's working." Kalara returned to the controls, eyes scanning a translucent display filled with glyphs that shifted when he tried to look directly at them. "I need to access the echo relay on Vren Station," she said. "The location of my allies is encoded there." "Vren Station," Lance repeated. "That's the one shaped like a corkscrew with budget issues, right? The place where I once saw a man trade a kidney for a fried sandwich?" "Yes. It is sufficiently unregulated." "Perfect. I always wanted to return to the site of my worst food poisoning." The ship creaked gently as it disengaged its camouflage and drifted out of the junk field. Stars brightened, glittering around them like cosmic paparazzi. "So," Lance said, settling into the co-pilot seat, "do I call you Your Majesty now, or do we just pretend you're a suspiciously elegant mechanic in disguise?" "Queen in exile," she said flatly. "Titles are optional." He grinned. I'm calling you Sparkles. She raised an eyebrow. Why? Because you sparkle under pressure. Her only response was a sharp upward tilt of her chin, but he swore he saw the ghost of a smile again. The ship jumped, space folding around them, like a dream snapping shut. The sensation made Lance's stomach do a somersault, then write a formal complaint. They emerged near Vren's station, a metal monstrosity orbiting a dim star, like a half-dismantled paperclip. Shuttles buzzed in and out of its many ports, most of them violating at least 6 safety regulations. Kalara guided them in with practiced ease, slipping between freighters and mining barges as if she'd done it 100 times. "Do we have a cover story?" Lance asked. "Or are we just going in bold and mysterious?" "You are a mechanic with unusual clearance. I am your cargo specialist." "Cargo specialist," he echoed. "Right. Mysterious. Possibly telepathic. Definitely royalty-adjacent cargo specialist. We must avoid attracting attention. Sparkles, I hate to break it to you, but you look like the protagonist of a forbidden romance holo. You're going to attract attention by breathing." She glanced at him, amused and annoyed all at once. "Then try not to say anything that gets us shot." Vren Station's interior was even worse than Lance remembered. Neon advertisements flickered beside exposed wiring, and vendors shouted over each other trying to sell wares that might have once been food or weapons or both. The air smelled like burnt oil and stale ambition. "Ah, home, sweet home," Lance muttered. "Watch your pockets, and possibly your kidneys." Kalara walked with unshakable purpose, drawing more stares than she probably realized. Lance followed close, trying to look like someone important, which mostly involved walking fast and frowning at imaginary clipboards. They reached a narrow corridor tucked behind a noodle stand. Kalara pressed her palm to a panel, whispering a word that echoed in Lance's ears like a bell underwater. The wall shimmered, revealing a door that didn't exist a moment ago. "You know," Lance said, "I used to think doors were just doors. Now I expect every wall I pass to betray me." Inside was a small chamber, filled with blinking tech, and a smell that suggested someone had once attempted to cook an octopus using only hope and spite. Kalara moved quickly, pulling a translucent crystal from beneath her sleeve and sliding it into a recessed slot. Lights flared. Data streamed across a floating display. "Coordinates to my loyalist enclave," she said. "They survived. Barely." Lance leaned over her shoulder. "Looks like they're holed up near the Nebulon Rift. That's a pirate zone." "Exactly. It's the one place my uncle's reach does not extend easily." A crackle sounded from the doorway behind them. Then a voice. "Didn't expect to find you here, Your Grace." Lance turned. The figure was human, or close enough, dressed in faded armor, with a face full of scars and a smirk that said he enjoyed collecting them. "Friend of yours?" Lance whispered. "Captain Threx," Kalara said coolly. "Formerly of my royal guard, now a bounty hound." "Ah," Lance muttered. "So not a friend. Got it." Threx raised his weapon lazily. "Big bounty on your pretty head, and an even bigger one if you're brought in breathing. But hey," he winked at Lance, "I'm flexible." Kalara moved faster than Lance thought possible, flinging a disc that exploded in a burst of light. Lance yelped, tripped over a wire, and accidentally knocked over a console that promptly began sparking. They ran, back into the market, dodging startled vendors and confused tourists. Threx shouted behind them, followed by a plasma bolt that vaporized a churro stand. "I didn't even get to eat," Lance wailed as Kalara pulled him through a maintenance hatch. "You'll live." "That's what you say now, but I've seen what happens to men who skip churros." The hatch slammed shut behind them. Darkness and silence. Then Kalara turned to him, breathing hard, eyes fierce. "We need to leave. Now." "Agreed," Lance panted. "Also, I vote we add avoid Vren Station forever to our future plans." "Noted." And just like that, they vanished into the bowels of the station, chased by betrayal and bound together by the galaxy's worst travel itinerary. "Okay," Lance muttered. "I admit I didn't think the sandwich debt would come back to bite me this hard." Kalara drew a small cube from her belt and flung it at the nearest vent. It exploded into a magnetic pulse that fried the drone's circuits and turned its descent into a clanging dance of mechanical failure. I think I love you, Lance whispered. Kalara looked at him coolly. Wait until we survive. They sprinted through the access corridor to the wormhole chamber, where Skibbo was slapping the conduit with a wrench and singing, Hold together, baby. Daddy needs a miracle. You're up, Skibbo yelled. I primed the coil with citrus and emotional instability. That sounds unnecessarily specific, Lance said as he leapt onto the platform. Kalara joined him, her hand brushing his arm. The conduit began to glow. Ready? She asked. To be molecular soup? Always. The chamber exploded in light. Reality bent sideways and sound twisted into color. As they vanished into the tear in space-time, Lance thought he heard Skibbo yell, Tell the rift I said hi, and that it still owes me a sofa. Then nothing but the quiet hum of the universe unfolding itself around them. They tumbled out of the wormhole like laundry from a broken dryer, landing in a heap on the metallic floor of a derelict observation deck overlooking the Nebulan Rift. Lance groaned, his internal organs seemingly rearranged into alphabetical order. Kylara stood first, of course, brushing herself off with that maddening grace of hers while stars wheeled overhead like silent, burning witnesses. Well, Lance muttered, clutching his side, that was a smooth landing. If by smooth you mean traumatizing at the cellular level, Kellar offered him a hand. Better than being dead. Debatable. Their new location was ancient. A pre-collapse observation station, long abandoned, now suspended in silent orbit around the rift. The air smelled like dust and machine oil dreams, and every corridor echoed like it remembered a war. Kalara activated her scanning beacon, and a faint blip appeared on the holographic map. Signal trace confirmed. The Loyalist envoy is here. They've been hiding in the subdeck's quantum folds. Quantum folds? That's a real thing? I always thought that was just a term shampoo companies used. Kalara shot him a quick smile before leading the way, boots echoing on cracked Durasteel. The air grew thinner the deeper they went, lights flickering as if trying to warn them in Morse code. At the bottom of the stairwell, a glowing panel pulsed in response to Kalara's hand. A hiss, a click, and a chamber opened. 6 figures stood inside. Armor scuffed, expressions tight. One stepped forward, a tall woman with copper braids and a scar that ran the length of her jaw. She bowed low. My queen. Not anymore, Kalara replied. Not unless we end this. The envoy provided them with new data. Her uncle's fleet was minutes away. He'd tracked their jump signature and was preparing to broadcast false footage of Kalara's supposed death, claiming control over the throne by default. The people would mourn her, never suspect the truth. Classic space coup, Lance muttered. All the drama, none of the flair. They had one shot, override the broadcast system in the station's relay core, and stream Kalara live to the galaxy. If they could prove she lived and expose the conspiracy, the throne would be hers again. If not, well, at least they'd go down with dramatic flair. The relay core was at the top of the station, naturally, because, of course, the critical system was nowhere convenient. They sprinted through corridors as proximity alarms blared. Her uncle's fleet had arrived. Remind me again why we don't just hide and let someone else deal with this, Lance asked between breaths. Because that's what people without courage do. And we're not those people? Kalara just smiled and handed him a data spike. I need you to plug this in. I'll draw the fire. Wait, what? No, I'm the sidekick. You're the exiled queen with a face like sunrise and the spine of a neutron star. I do the running. You do the inspiring. She placed a hand on his chest. You've done more than run. You've stayed. Lance blinked. That's unfairly moving. They resurfaced in a ventilation shaft that could barely fit a single adult human, let alone 2 fugitives with deeply incompatible definitions of personal space. Lance pressed himself flat against the metal wall, which smelled vaguely like expired curry and despair, while Kalara shimmied ahead, her expression composed in that infuriating royal way she had. This is undignified, she muttered. You know what's even more undignified? Getting shot while debating spatial etiquette. Keep crawling, Sparkles. They emerged into a decommissioned supply dock lit by flickering strips of half-functional lumen tape. Rows of crates were stacked haphazardly, some marked hydro-ration units. Others, do not open under any circumstance. Naturally, Lance made a mental note to open those later. Kalara activated a small projection unit embedded in her gauntlet, revealing a star map with an urgent pulse centered near the Nebulan Rift. We jump from the station's smuggling ring. It bypasses the main customs corridor. Risky, but faster. Great, Lance said. Nothing says comfort like trusting your life to black market gate tech run by a guy named Skibbo. Kalara frowned. Skibbo? He's, how do I put this gently, the kind of man who bathes in engine degreaser and thinks that's charisma. They slipped through the dock and into the maintenance sublevels of Wren Station, where even the security bots feared to hover. Flickering monitors played glitchy ads for synthetic romance experiences and sentient mattress subscriptions. A robot with 3 arms and 1 wheel skittered past them, muttering, "All hail the glorious return of the Sauce King," which Lance chose not to investigate. At the bottom of a rust-streaked lift shaft, a door blinked with an interface too old to be compatible with modern systems. Kalara bent down, pulled a thin cable from her wrist device, and jacked in with a satisfying click. "Bet you say that to all the obsolete hardware," Lance joked. "It appreciates my finesse," she replied, typing commands with alarming speed. The door hissed open, revealing a chamber bathed in soft purple light in the scent of heated citrus. "Well, this is disturbingly pleasant," Lance murmured. "That's the illusion," Kalara said. "Prepare yourself." A round creature with 4 eyes, no visible limbs, and an aggressively floral vest bounced toward them. "Skibbo lives," it announced, voice pitched somewhere between enthusiastic karaoke and a dying harmonica. "Skibbo," Lance said, bracing. "You look squishier than I remember." "I've been exfoliating. Who's your shiny friend?" Skibbo's eyes turned toward Kalara, and for a moment the room went very quiet. "I am a merchant of delicate goods," she said carefully. "And I," Lance added, "am her extremely underpaid assistant." Skibbo squinted at them, which meant all 4 of his eyes narrowed until he resembled a mildly suspicious raisin. "You smell like secrets and imminent disaster. I like that. Follow me." They entered a side corridor that pulsed with unstable gravitational fluctuations. Lance nearly tripped over a floating mug labeled "Property of Someone Who Punches," and Kalara walked with the confident poise of someone genetically incapable of stumbling. "Why do your shortcuts always feel like dreams I regret having?" Lance whispered. "It is the safest route," Kalara replied. "That's deeply troubling." Skibbo led them to a spherical chamber with a cracked warp conduit embedded in the ceiling and wires running in what Lance generously described as directions. "She's a prototype wormhole pucker," Skibbo announced proudly. "Unstable, untested, and banned in 33 systems." "Can it get us to the rift alive?" Kalara asked. "Define alive." She handed over a credit sheet with enough value to make Skibbo shudder in delight. "You've got an hour before the local security grid resets and scans this area. I'll prep the conduit." As Skibbo shuffled off singing something about gravy, Lance turned to Kalara. "Look, I've been rolling with this chaos for a while now, but are you sure this is the only way? My uncle will anticipate more traditional jumps. We must be unpredictable." "Right, because nothing says unpredictable like trusting our atoms to a machine Skibbo built out of stubbornness and kitchen parts." A sudden noise cut through the chamber, high-pitched, rhythmic, and growing louder. Kalara's eyes narrowed. "Patrol drones." "Already? How'd they find us?" "Lance Kessler," a robotic voice intoned over the speakers. "You are harboring a high-value fugitive and have exceeded your sandwich debt at 6 local establishments. Surrender." Then she was gone, sprinting across the exposed corridor as auto turrets unfolded from the ceiling and began spitting plasma. He ran the opposite direction, diving into the relay control room, jamming the spike into the console. Sparks flew, the lights dimmed, and for a moment he thought it had failed. Then Kylara's face appeared on the galactic stream. She stood in the center of the corridor, calm and regal despite the chaos around her. Her voice carried across the stars, steady and clear. She told the truth of her uncle's betrayal, of the assassination attempt, of the loyalists who had risked everything. And then she did the unthinkable. "I no longer seek the throne," she said. "I seek a new kind of leadership, one not inherited but earned." Gasps echoed in the chamber. Lance's jaw dropped. "You're abdicating? We just did all that running for an epilogue twist?" The stream ended. Outside, the enemy ships paused. Then one by one, they began to power down. Loyalist ships emerged from stealth fields surrounding the station. Kalara's uncle, exposed and politically vaporized, fled in disgrace. The coup crumbled in real time, like bad cake under too much frosting. Later, as they sat on a balcony overlooking the stars, Kalara nudged him with her boot. "You look disappointed." "I just thought I was going to be romantically entangled with a queen," he said. "Now I have to recalibrate all my bragging rights." "I'm still royalty," she replied. "I just prefer not to rule by bloodline." "So, you're like a freelance monarch?" "A monarch on sabbatical." He tilted his head, grinning. "You ever consider fixing ships for a living? It's not glamorous, but the snacks are decent." "I might," she said, "especially if the company's good." They shared a quiet moment, starlight spilling across the floor like a soft benediction. Lance, who had once measured his day by whether the vending machine gave change, now found himself measuring time in Kalara's smiles and the weight of choices he never expected to make. "Hey," he said suddenly, "remember when I said it was just a routine ship malfunction?" Kalara laughed. "You mean the day that changed the galaxy?" "Yeah. Next time I see a blinking dashboard, I'm just going to walk away." "No, you won't." And he knew she was right. The sky fell in the middle of Nathan Cole's lunch break. He had just bitten into the last hydro-grown tomato he'd cultivated with loving care in his recycled plastic greenhouse dome when the tremor hit, sharp and sudden, like the planet had hiccuped. The tomato fell out of his hand and hit the ground with a squish that felt personal. "Really?" he muttered, checking the dome's seismic sensors. Nothing major on the system. Then again, the dome's tech was about 15 years behind. Corporate had promised a software update sometime around the next ice age. He pulled on his jacket, patched in 4 places, one by duct tape and another by a hopeful application of chewing gum, and stepped outside into the brittle daylight. Earth's atmosphere had been on a decline since the Great Coughing Fit of 2197, so the sky was a perpetual orange smog with a pinch of purple, like someone had overcooked a sunset. The crash site wasn't hard to find. A trail of melted scrub and twisted glassed earth led toward the eastern ridge, where a thin spiral of smoke climbed upward, like a question mark too shy to form words. Nathan blinked against the haze and adjusted the settings on his retinal visor. The HUD flickered, outlined the crash in a green box, and labeled it. "Foreign object detected. Probability of not killing you, 22%. "That's oddly specific," he said, pocketing a wrench because it made him feel safer. No one respected a man with a clipboard, but a man with a wrench? That said, "I'm not here to fix you, but I could, emotionally or otherwise." The object had left a crater about the size of his kitchen, which wasn't saying much, since his kitchen was technically also his laundry room and his backup sleeping nook. Smoke curled from the edge of the scorched earth, and the air smelled like burnt almonds and regret. He didn't expect to find a body. It wasn't a human body. It looked human, mostly, pale, almost luminous skin stretched over limbs that were too elegant, too perfect, like they'd been sculpted by someone who found bones optional. Long black hair spilled across the ground like liquid shadow, tangled with debris and bits of singed moss. Her armor was scorched and cracked, formed of interlocking hex plates that shimmered faintly even in ruin. And her ears were long, not elf long, but I hear your heartbeat from 3 towns away long. They tapered back like sculpted blades, twitching faintly. Her eyes snapped open. Nathan flailed. "Whoa, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt your nap? Crash-induced nap? Wait, are you okay?" The woman hissed. Not the snake-like hiss of villainy, but a weary, low sound like someone had just asked her to work overtime on a Friday. Her lips parted, revealing fangs. Not metaphorical fangs. Not "she has a sharp smile" fangs. Real, honest-to-gravity teeth designed for puncturing things that probably did not enjoy being punctured. "Oh," Nathan said, "you're one of those aliens." She tried to rise, then collapsed. The armor buzzed, attempting some kind of self-repair, but the systems were clearly on their last bite. She looked at him, feral and desperate. Nathan held up his hands. Okay, look, I'm guessing you're not here for a neighborhood cookout, but I'm not exactly seasoned vampire chow either. So maybe we can start with names? She blinked warily. I'm Nathan. Cole, botanist, sometimes engineer, full-time confusion specialist. She did not answer. Instead, her eyes tracked the movement of his pulse. He could feel her hunger like radiation, ancient and sharp. You look like you need a snack, he said, and not the me kind. Hold on. He rummaged in his satchel and pulled out a nutrition pack. It was engineered for high-caloric survival and tasted like oatmeal had lost a bet. He unwrapped it and offered it with the kind of hope one normally reserved for parleying with dragons. She sniffed it, then took it, bit, chewed, and gagged so violently that her entire body jolted. Okay, Nathan said, not your cuisine. Got it. She stared at him, confusion wrestling with instinct in her expression. Then with effort, she pushed herself into a seated position. Her voice, when it came, was hoarse and resonant. You gave sustenance, not blood. Well, you seem peckish, and I left my volunteer blood donor badge at home, he said, trying a grin. It worked on the rabbits back at the dome. Mostly. She studied him as if trying to identify which part of him was defective. You fear me not. Oh, I'm terrified, Nathan said cheerfully. But panic gives me hives, and I ran out of antihistamines last Tuesday. A pause, then softly. Sarava. Gesundheit. My name, she said, glaring. Right, Sarava. Beautiful. Very vampiric. Love the vowels. She stood slowly, unsteadily, one hand bracing against the rim of the crater. Her legs trembled under her, and Nathan instinctively moved to help her, then hesitated. She was a being who had likely drained a few dozen lives before breakfast on her homeworld. Touching her without permission felt like asking a chainsaw if it wanted a hug. Still, he offered his arm. She looked at it, then at him, and after a long moment of insulted silence, took it. You will regret this, she murmured. Most of my regrets involve public karaoke and expired pudding, he said, leading her toward the dome. She tilted her head. What is karaoke? Something I'll regret explaining. Behind them, the crater sizzled, and the air shimmered oddly, as if reality itself were still adjusting to her presence. Nathan didn't see it, but Sarava did. Her eyes narrowed. They will come, she whispered. Nathan glanced at her. You mean like the authorities? She shook her head. Worse. My kind. Hunters of betrayal. They track the scent of restraint. Wow, he said. Sounds like my last landlord. She didn't smile, but something softened in her jaw. They reached the dome just as the last rays of filtered sunlight caught the edge of the shattered horizon. Nathan opened the access hatch and held it for her. She paused. You should not help me. I'm not great at shoulds, he said. Besides, you didn't eat me. That counts for something. She stepped inside, silent as shadow. And in the quiet behind them, the wind carried a scent neither of them noticed. A distortion in the air. A vibration felt not through the ears, but the spine. Something was already following the trail. But for now, in the botany dome, filled with overgrown tomatoes, accidental science projects, and the worst nutritional bars in the quadrant, the vampire woman sat down on a broken crate and said, You are strange, Nathan Cole. Thank you, he said. I try. Sarava tried to kill a tomato on her third night. Nathan had stepped out for a moment, just long enough to recycle some air filters and chase a rogue squirrel drone out of his compost bin, when he returned to find her crouched in the hydroponics section of the dome, fangs bared, hissing at a cluster of heirloom reds, as if they'd just insulted her ancestors. They don't bite, you know, he said, cautiously setting down the filter. They moved, she replied, voice tight with restrained instinct. They're plants, Sarava. They're legally not allowed to move. They swayed. Aggressively. Nathan picked up a tomato, gave it a gentle squeeze, then held it up. This guy, I call him Larry. He's a pacifist. She looked at him, looked at the tomato, then slowly straightened. This planet is deeply unwell. Welcome to Earth, he said. We're only slightly radioactive and emotionally repressed. She followed him back toward the main section of the dome, armor clicking softly with each step. It was still cracked in places, like eggshells held together by magnetic stubbornness, but its inner cores had begun to pulse faintly again. Nathan figured that meant it was healing, or plotting. Over the past 2 days, she had barely spoken unless prompted, mostly watching him with the wary stillness of someone unsure whether to flee or strike. She asked questions sometimes, strange ones wrapped in ancient phrasing. Why do you live alone? Do you not have a bloodkin pack? I had a roommate once, he said. He tried to microwave a fork. We don't talk anymore. And you cultivate food for pleasure? Technically, it's for survival, but I pretend it's a hobby, so I feel like I have a personality. Sarava had taken to perching on a stack of storage crates at night, half hidden in shadows, observing him as he moved between the lab terminals and the greenhouse. He tried to act natural, which, in his case, meant humming old pop songs and talking to himself about soil acidity. By the fourth night, she began to laugh. Not a full laugh. Just a quick exhale, amused and slightly confused, when he slipped on an algae patch and yelled, "I regret everything!" He looked up at her from the floor, algae sticking to his sleeve. Was that a laugh? I emitted a breath in response to absurd stimuli. That's a laugh. You are absurd. I try. She tilted her head, examining him. You do not fear me, still. He shrugged. I mean, you've got the aesthetic of a galactic apex predator, sure. But you also apologized to my fern yesterday when you bumped it. It startled me. It's a fern. It looked judging. He grinned, then sobered slightly. I don't think you're going to hurt me. You are incorrect. Statistically, I'm incorrect about a lot of things. I once thought quantum lasagna was a viable dinner. Sarava's smile didn't reach her eyes. The thirst does not leave. I bury it beneath stillness. But stillness is not peace. He didn't respond for a while. Then quietly, is there anything I can do to help? You already did, she said. You gave me a choice. The power flickered, not the casual flicker of a dying fuse. This was a pulse, a deep thrum that made the dome's reinforced walls creak as if something vast had just blinked in the dark. Nathan rushed to the console. Systems were stable, no intrusions, no atmospheric anomalies. But the air felt heavier. Sarava was already standing, eyes glowing faintly. They are close. The tomatoes? No, she said, with the weariness of a parent correcting a child for the 5th time. The hollow suns. Sounds like a metal band. They are not music, she said, voice sharp. They are anti-life, forged to purge what my kind became. Nathan checked the external scanners. Nothing visible, no heat signatures, no movement. Just the same dust-blown wasteland and decaying satellite towers. Are you sure? I feel them. It is not something that lies. He nodded. All right, we prep. For what? For a very unpleasant reunion, he said. Also, I should probably hide Larry. He led her to the storage vault, a room filled with emergency rations, obsolete lab equipment, and a life-size cardboard cutout of President Calden that Nathan had never found the courage to recycle. Sarava examined the vault's magnetic locks, frowned, then sliced through one with a talon-like fingertip. That was for security, Nathan said, watching the sparks. It was insufficient. He pointed toward a stack of shielding tiles. You could rest behind those, they're lead-lined. Not because I expected company, just because the last guy in logistics thought they made good pizza ovens. I will not hide. Then what's the plan? I confront them. Alone. Right, Nathan said. Just like the tomatoes. She raised an eyebrow. This is not a plant. He put a hand on her arm gently. You don't have to do this alone. Her eyes locked onto his hand. For a second, the thirst roared behind them, like a wave about to break. But she exhaled, slow and steady. If I fail, they will take you, to use against me. Then don't fail. You are not a warrior. Nope, but I am stubborn, and I make a mean mushroom stew. That is not a qualification for survival. It is if you add enough spice. The lights flickered again. This time something blinked into view at the horizon. A distortion. A ripple. Like heat over metal, but colder. Wronger. Sarava stepped to the dome's edge, her armor now humming with threads of dormant power awakening. They are here. Nathan stood beside her, wrench in hand. Guess we better make a good first impression? She looked at him, strange and unreadable. Then finally, if I fall, you run. You can't order me around. I can. I'll pretend to obey. Her expression was a storm barely held at bay. Strange man. Hungry woman. The air outside twisted, and the stars above began to dim. Nathan's idea of a battle plan involved coffee, a playlist of 22nd century synth jazz, and reinforcing the dome doors with gardening equipment. He tied together 2 rakes, a trowel, and a half-dismantled solar toaster to form what he called a defensive matrix. Sarava stared at it for several long seconds. That is a pile of farm tools. It's a symbol of hope, Nathan said, adjusting the trowel with solemn care. And possibly tetanus. She walked past him to the access hatch and touched the inner seal with 2 fingers. Her armor pulsed once, reading the material, then emitted a low harmonic hum that sank into the structure. The hatch vibrated, stiffened, and locked with a finality Nathan didn't like. What did you do? Reinforce the barrier with harmonic compression. Nothing leaves or enters until it fractures. That's not how doors usually work, Sarava. Doors are meant to open. This one must not. He considered arguing, then decided against it. She looked like someone who had survived wars measured in centuries and wasn't particularly impressed by bickering botanists. Instead, he poured her a mug of lukewarm brew from the lab's nutritional reservoir. She sniffed it, suspicious. What is this? Coffee. Well, synthesized coffee, made from bark, caffeine culture, and something labeled stimulant compound 7B. It might be illegal. She sipped it, blinked, then blinked again. I feel faster. Oh, good, Nathan said, taking a sip himself. That means it's working. If you suddenly start reciting poetry or rearranging atoms, just let me know. The dome lights flickered. This time they didn't come back. Emergency glow strips engaged, bathing the interior in low blue light. Outside the dome, a second shimmer passed across the air, like a sigh through glass. Sarava turned, eyes gleaming with that eerie internal glow. They are phasing closer. Define phasing in a way that doesn't involve existential dread. They exist partially out of sync with your space-time. They slip. They hunt through the seams of reality. Oh, Nathan said, like salesmen. She didn't ask what that meant. She was already moving to the observation hatch. Through the reinforced glass, he saw shapes, humanoid outlines flickering in and out, like broken holograms. No faces, just smooth voids beneath cracked helmets, silver cords running like veins over dark armor. They moved without walking, flicking through space in jagged intervals, their forms never quite whole. Nathan leaned closer to the glass. Okay, now I'm scared. They are the hollow suns, Sarava said softly. Once my kin. Now they serve the void accord. They hunt those who disobey, who resist. Are you sure they're not here for the coffee? Her glance was dry. They consume light, not bitterness. Well, that's one of us, Nathan muttered. The first pulse hit the dome. It wasn't sound. It was pressure like gravity had hiccuped. The walls buckled slightly, then corrected themselves. The plants shivered. The tomatoes dropped from their vines en masse, bouncing off the ground like tiny red sacrifices. Nathan picked one up and cradled it. Larry, no. Sarava moved toward the door, every motion fluid, precise. Her armor responded to her intent, plates aligning with sharper angles, energy collecting at her palms. I will speak to them, she said. Negotiate? Stall! He grabbed her wrist. What if they won't talk? Then they die. I meant you. She didn't answer. He stepped in front of her. You told me you didn't want to hurt anymore, that you were trying, that you wanted a choice. I chose, she said and gently moved him aside. The access hatch vibrated again. This time, the harmonic lock flickered. The shimmer outside coalesced into one solid form. It was taller than Sarava, with armor that glowed at the seams, pale blue like dead stars. Its faceplate cracked open, revealing a dark cavity filled with shifting static. Nathan took a shaky breath. "Tell me that's not its actual face." "That is its absence," Sarava said. The static creature raised a hand. The dome's outer panel creaked. A warning blared. External integrity compromised. Structural failure imminent. Nathan reached for his wrench. Sarava reached for her mind. She didn't shout. She sang. A note, clear, resonant, unearthly, burst from her throat and struck the dome like a bell. The whole structure trembled. The creature outside flickered violently, shrieked without sound, and retreated half a step. "What was that?" Nathan asked. "The song of claiming," Sarava replied. "It binds my right to this space." "Well, sing it louder, maybe in C major." The creature replied in kind, not with song, but with a distortion. The stars outside twisted, forming a circle of darkness behind it. From that hole stepped two more hollow suns. One of them floated rather than walked, trailing strands of void light like cobwebs. Sarava's voice lowered. "3. I may hold for minutes, perhaps less." Nathan looked around. "Do you need energy, power, snacks?" "I need time." "I've got a time regulator in the lab," he said. "It's broken, but if you don't mind your seconds feeling like Thursdays, it might help." Sarava didn't smile, but her eyes flickered with something. Gratitude, perhaps, or disbelief. He ran, back through the dome, past the twitching fern, into the storage room where broken tech went to die. He yanked open a panel, dug through coils and dust, and pulled out a rusted regulator, still pulsing faintly with chronal residue. He jammed in a battery, slapped it twice, and sprinted back. Sarava caught it mid-air as he tossed it to her. "Strap it to your core node," he said. "Might buy you 30 seconds of hypertemporal clarity, or it might explode." "Then it is not unlike me," she said. The creatures closed in. Sarava activated the regulator. Her outline blurred, shimmered, split for a fraction of a moment, then refocused. She moved. Nathan had never seen motion like it. She was stillness interrupted by blinding bursts, here, then there, then in midair, kicking a hollow sun so hard its helmet cracked sideways. She danced through physics with casual disregard. But there were 3, and she was weakening. One of the creatures struck her square in the back. She fell. Nathan screamed. The creature turned toward him. He didn't think. He threw Larry. The tomato splatted uselessly off his chest, but it was enough of a distraction. Sarava surged upward and drove her hand into the creature's core. A burst of light, ultraviolet, scorching, exploded outward. The hollow sun collapsed. The others hissed, retreating. Nathan ran to her. She knelt, gasping, blood on her lips. "Not enough." He grabbed her shoulders. "You made a promise." She looked up. "I remember." The last creature raised its arms. The void rippled. Nathan stood in front of her, unarmed, terrified, unmoving. The creature hesitated. Something in its stance shifted. Then without a sound it vanished. Gone. Sarava stared at him. "You stood." "I do that sometimes. For me. I mean, mostly for Larry. But yes." She laughed then. A real one. Then passed out. Nathan found himself learning the subtle difference between unconscious alien vampire and hibernating space apex predator. One was limp and troublingly pale. The other was Sarava, glowing faintly, breathing slow and shallow, and still radiating the kind of quiet menace that made the toaster refuse to work near her. "Come on," he muttered, kneeling beside her. "You saved my life. You're not allowed to die. That's the rule. I made it up just now, but it's official." She didn't stir. The life monitor clipped to her armor gave off a steady blue pulse, somewhere between hibernating and defying death out of spite. Nathan decided that was hopeful. He checked her pulse twice, cursed his own incompetence 3 times, and finally decided to do what he did best when overwhelmed: make soup. He dragged a portable heat coil out from storage and began chopping nutrient-rich greens while muttering to himself. "You save a vampire from ancient space assassins, and they repay you by collapsing in your arms like a gothic romance protagonist." Classic, the tomatoes were off limits. After Larry's martyrdom, Nathan had declared them a memorial species. By the time the broth was bubbling, Sarava stirred, just barely, a twitch in her fingers. Her lips parted. I smell roots. Nathan rushed over, holding a steaming bowl. It's not much, but it's warm, and it won't offend your biology unless you're allergic to carrots. She opened one eye. Carrots are forbidden in the southern nebulae. That's fair. They're smug. She tried to sit up, failed, and settled for lifting a hand. Her armor responded sluggishly, reinforcing her limbs with slow arcs of energy. How long? You've been out about 14 hours. I was about to start composing poetry in your honor. I would prefer soup. Smart choice. The poem rhymed void with android and went downhill from there. She took the bowl and drank without ceremony. He watched her nervous. Is it helping? He asked. She nodded, then grimaced. It is. Bland. Good. That means it's working. She finished the soup and wiped her mouth with the back of her gauntlet. The Hollow Suns did not expect you. Few people do. You stood between me and death. I was mostly hoping to confuse them long enough for you to wake up. Why? Because I like you, he said, and then regretted the honesty immediately. You know in the way a guy likes someone who hasn't tried to eat him. Yet, she stared at him, long and unreadable. You are strange. And you're a half-starved space vampire being hunted by interdimensional killbots. So I think we're even. She smiled, just slightly. You could have run. Yeah, but then who would water the plants? The lights above flickered as the dome systems rebooted. Power had returned gradually in fits and spurts. Outside, the Hollow Suns were gone. But Nathan knew better than to trust silence in deep space. Sarava stood slowly. I must rebuild my strength. Rest then. You've earned it. Number feeding restores me fastest. He froze, she noticed. I will not take from you. I know, he said, but it still feels like I'm offering a jug of orange juice to a black hole. She walked to the console, examined the readouts. There is wildlife nearby, creatures I can draw from without death. Assuming the squirrel drones don't mug you first. She tilted her head. Squirrel drones. Long story. Don't pet anything with antennae. He moved beside her, scanning the outer fields. The local biosphere had recovered well since the last solar flare, and the ecosystem now supported several Earth-compatible species, including something that resembled goats, if goats had 6 legs and emitted radio static when scared. Sarava pointed. That one, it will suffice. You're going to bite the static goat? Not bite, drain, through resonance. I feel like I should write an ethics paper about this. She made her way outside, armor shielding her from the harsh winds. Nathan watched through the dome's camera feed as she knelt beside the creature, placed her palm over its chest and sang, low and harmonic. The goat shivered, blinked in static, then calmed. Moments later she stood, and the goat wobbled off, dazed but unharmed. That was kind of beautiful, he whispered. I told you, she said over the comm. We are not monsters, not always. When she returned, her posture was stronger, her steps more certain, the glow in her eyes steadier. Nathan handed her a protein bar. Dessert? She took it. This one tastes of gravel. That's the peanut flavor. Why? We don't talk about the peanut division. She remained her same tall, long-eared, scowling self, but there was something different in how the light clung to her, how the shadows respected her. She glowed faintly, not with power, but with something warmer, human almost. The Eclipticon flinched. You are corrupted. I am evolved. She raised her hand, and the glow from Nathan's memory poured from her palm. The light struck the Eclipticon, and it screamed, not in pain but in disbelief. Mercy cannot destroy me. Then it will outlast you. She stepped forward. The creature reeled. Reality shivered. Nathan, watching from a safe-ish distance, muttered, Go get him, Space Dracula. Sarava walked straight through the creature. Not struck it, not banished it. Walked through it. And as she passed, she left something behind. Resonance, harmony, something soft and fierce. The Eclipticon writhed, then cracked, then folded in on itself like a bad decision in reverse. The rift closed. The wind calmed. The stars realigned. pretending they'd never wobbled. Sarava turned to Nathan. "It is done." He blinked. "Did you just emotion blast a god thing to death? I shared with it what you gave me, and it could not hold it. I mean, yeah, I'm emotionally exhausting." She smiled. Actually smiled. "I will not argue." They walked back to the dome, which had definitely seen better days. The power flickered, the hydroponics hummed sadly, and the squirrel drones were nesting in the ceiling again. Nathan surveyed the wreckage. "Well, guess we're going to need another toaster." Sarava sat beside him, still glowing faintly. "I will miss this place." "You're leaving?" "Number we are." He looked up. "Wait, what?" "You gave me a reason to stay, but I cannot remain still. There are others like me, others who need what you gave. Not blood, not fear, just a chance. And you want me to come with you?" "I do." He stared at the stars, then at the melted snack bag, then at her. "Okay, but I get to drive at least once. You can try." They packed what they could salvage, seeds, notes, the good mugs, and boarded her ship. It was more grown than built, sleek and lined with faint veins of energy. Nathan took one look at the console and asked, "So where's the go button?" "It responds to voice." "Oh, cool. Go nothing happened." Sarava sighed. "You have to ask nicely." "Oh, please go?" The ship shivered, then rose. Nathan whooped as the dome shrank beneath them. "This is insane." "Correct. And we're just leaving everything behind?" "No," she said. "We are taking everything forward." They rose through the clouds past the scars of old battles and the ruins of forgotten packs. As the stars welcomed them, Nathan leaned back in his chair. "So," he said, "do I get a cool vampire name now? Like Night Fang or the Snack Bringer?" Sarava chuckled. "You are Nathan. That is enough." He smiled. "You're not so bad yourself, Sarava." She turned to him, eyes soft. "I made you a promise. Forever. Then let's see how far forever goes."